Welcome, beloved hearts of the Sacred Heart Awakenings. Welcome to another weekly live Love Wisdom. In today's topic, I want to share about perception and judgment. They both go hand in hand in some ways because as we perceive, we're also judging. So let's break it down and review each of these terminologies. And I'd like to welcome those who are live now, and I welcome any comments or questions you may have throughout this presentation or this topic, which is an open forum. It's informal discussion. And normally when I do formal talks, I usually like to have pictures and PowerPoints and formalities and all. But this is more of an open love wisdom type forum discussion to share with the group and inspire and motivate and activate and awaken. So waving at you, hello, Rosalie. Thank you for being here. And thank you all who are watching in replay land. I say hello to you as well. And please share any comments you have or questions throughout this presentation. So let's break down perception and let's look at it from a different angle, or let's look at it how it's defined. So perception is how we understand and interpret certain things or something or someone. And so what is it? There are three keys to the perception. And these three keys to the perception I want to talk about. One of them, which is, the three types of perception. One of them is based on our own personal experience in this lifetime and how we're raised. And the second one is based on our current situation, our current environment. In other words, what country do we come from? What is our culture? What is our background? And it does kind of tie into our personal experience in some ways, but not really, because our personal experience is how we grew up with our own family, and we're each unique in our own way. And so all of that factors into the perception of how we see someone else, or how we see certain situations, or how we experience certain situations, and experience being with others through certain relationships, etc. So the third key to the perception is there's also a subconscious or unconscious type unawareness type pattern that is also within ourselves and our souls. And not too many psychologists talk about this. But now I'm looking at it from a mystical perspective, and I'm going deeper into the archives of the wisdom of the heart. And these are buried from past lives that can be projected in us, and we carry it from lifetime to lifetime. And so all of this factors into what we perceive now with our own minds and our own eyes, being from a human perspective, of course. So what can we do to shift this type of perception? How do we shift it? So one of them is, of course, having self-awareness and being more conscious of your own thoughts and actions and what you're doing and how you're looking at someone and how you're looking at certain situations. And you will find that sometimes what we may be seeing as being something so severe may not even be the case. And if you shift it to be more into the light, you may actually ease some of the pain and trauma that you feel. Now, when it comes to certain subconscious patterns of this perception that is hidden in ourselves, it is sometimes manifested in certain ways, such as traumas that we may have stage fright or have fear of heights, or just afraid to be with certain people, or how we interact with certain people in this lifetime as well. So all of that factors into it. Now, I normally don't like too many psychologists, but the one psychologist that I really like and admire is Carl Jung. So if you haven't heard from Carl Jung, he's a psychologist from he's a psychiatrist and a psychologist from the early 1900s. He was really from a period of 1875 to 1961. And he studied a lot on dreams and also perception and the whole subconscious. I mean, he really, really did a lot of research and experiments and did a lot of different cases with different peoples and their experiences. And the reason why I really like him is because he looks at it from a mystical perspective. And in some ways, I do feel he was very mystic. And he was a very conscious, spiritual type person. So he looked at it from a divine perspective, in other words, on a higher level. And I love the way he classifies and puts structure and order in the way he presents it. So to him, he says that in a perception, when it's repeated over and over, it forms some kind of autonomous archetype. So now he was very big about archetypes, and he used archetypes in certain dreams and how all that is perceived in our own dreams. And he even defined, as part of those archetypes, he talked about the shadow archetype. And that was his exact terminology. It was a shadow archetype. So these are our deepest and darkest type areas. And so what he's really describing is literally our dark side of us and what, that part of us as being human. So now reflecting back to that of the dark night of the soul that a lot of these topics do relate to the dark night of the soul as well. They relate to so many things. But looking at it from a dark night of the soul, when somebody is suffering so much and feeling like they're alone or they're in these shadows and they don't know what's happening, or there's confusion, there's uncertainty, there's all sorts of things happening. And all of that is part of the shadow archetype. It's part of the perception. So the key, and also what Carl Jung is saying, is also about self-awareness. So in other words, if we interpret it in other terminologies of the mystics, as they would say, it's more of us being a mirror to each other. And I like one of Carl Jung's quote. If you're irritated by someone else, then that just says, something about there. Then you start to find who you are. It describes ourselves. So I think he's trying to say more of us being a mirror to each other. So the things that you may perceive in others is also a reflection on us too. And I'll find the exact quote, and I'll post it in my Facebook group so that you can see. But it is a very deep quote on what he's trying to say with the whole perception and how we perceive the world. And so being self-aware is key to us unlocking a lot of how we can shift that perception in us. And of course, we have our own self-perception of ourselves. And I feel that we are our worst critics on ourselves. We're very hard on ourselves based on our own image. But where does that perception come from of ourselves? Why do we do this to ourselves? And I've noticed that in many cases, especially for the dark night of the soul, it happens a lot on ourselves. We beat ourselves up for no reason. And, I can attest, I was one of them too when I experienced my deepest dark night of the soul. But where does that come from? Why do we perceive ourselves in this different light or the shadow archetype? Because part of it is all what I just said, the keys, based on our own experience, based on past lives, based on the current environment, what may have happened in traumas. And it's also another aspect to the past lives as well. And that is what's been projected on you. So you may also be carrying subconscious projections of others from past lives of how they may have perceived you or been accused of in so many ways. And those who I sense who are light workers and healers have experienced a lot of trauma from these past lives, and that we carry with us here in this lifetime. And so that's why when if we do go into these dark night of souls, we feel it the strongest because our light is stronger. And so when the light is stronger, we tend to feel more. And so it could feel painful. It could feel like being alone, but you're not. So there's so much to work, inside of us, and all is inside of us that could be just rearranged and remodified and repatternized to be more in alignment with the light. So let me talk a little bit about judgment. We talked about perception. So the judgment is based on decisions and how we perceive. So they do go together in some ways. And that's why, like, the way, going back to the dark night of the soul and how we perceive ourselves and our own self-image is also how we're judging ourselves. And as I mentioned, if you're looking at it from a shadow archetype, you start to judge ourselves and attack ourselves and say, why am I not good enough? And then you start to do comparison. And there's also that aspect of the perception of the self. And a lot of it too also comes from, when talking about projection, comes from the media and what it is that we watch. Because so many things now that are out there, social media, the news, the commercials, all of that goes into our subconscious mind, and we just become so unaware of that it just becomes like a recorder. Or in other words, you could say it's almost brainwashing. So be very mindful what it is that you're watching, what it is that you're reading, and what it is that you're putting inside you subconsciously. And so that is another aspect of how to help shift that perception. So judging, there's examples of like saying, oh, this person is of a certain race, they must be certain way, this way. Or another one as an example is, well, that person is single, so they have all the time in the world, or they have all the money in the world. So these are just like perceptions that, not even right. And so in a lot of cases, this perception is just based on someone's own interpretation, but not necessarily on the actual facts of things and the way they are. And that's why it's best to know the person well and know before even saying about a perception. And that is another way of shifting it too. It's almost like they say the terminology they use, bursting the bubble. And so the same applies for us in the self-perception too, in how we perceive ourselves, and just getting to know ourselves deeper and deeper. That will also start to shift how you perceive yourself too, and knowing your own inner truth and who you really are. And we really are divine beings of love, and that's the absolute truth of who we are. But it is something that you must feel very deeply within you and know that it is so. And of course, if you're suffering this dark night of the soul and you really need help, get the help that you need. And I am very well equipped to help support with that and shifting those patterns, because that's been my specialty in my personal experience to reach this point now, to be able to be talking in these live videos and sharing a lot of love wisdom with a lot of love. And just reach out to me, direct message me in private, and just let me know if there's a way that I could help in many ways. So going back to the perception, I wanted to share a picture that I found, and it's so fascinating. This is by an Austrian philosopher, and he describes it so well about the different perception that he calls it the aspect perception. So if you look at this, so the Austrian philosopher's name is Ludwig Wittgenstein, so I apologize if I'm mispronouncing. But if you look at this image here, you see it? Do you see a duck? But can you also see that there's a rabbit? If you shift the perception, it looks like a rabbit, right? But if you shifted it the other way, you see the duck. So that's why he says the aspect of perception is how you change your own aspect and look at it from a different light. So let's speak from a higher self, our own inner self. So all of this, could be from a human perspective, but when you start to add the higher self into this and you look at things from a divine perception, then you start to work from a divine angle of looking at things. You start to see the higher truths of who we really are, because you start to see all as souls, loving souls, human souls, being the same source, a unity consciousness. And then that's when you have unlimited type of infinite or multidimensional ways of looking at a different perception. And you start to see more with love. And it's not really a judgment, but it's more of a constructive way of looking at things with love, looking at others with love. And this is part of when you start to look at yourself. When you look at yourself with this divine perception, that's when you start to find your own self-love as well. And you start digging deeper and deeper, because you start to find more layers of yourself, and you start to find more of your own truth and who you really are. And then you start to just fall in love naturally with yourself. The deeper that you dig in those energies and shifting the energy, because everything is energy. And it's really how we shift our mind, how we shift our thoughts, how we shift what we do, and how we look at things, and to look at things with a higher perspective, a higher love, a divine perspective. So that's really what I wanted to share on that for the whole perception and judgment. And I hope that you've enjoyed this topic. So please feel free to share any comments or questions you may have in the comments below. And I look forward to talking to you at the next Love Wisdom video and share some more topics. And of course, if there's any topic that you would like to hear about, please feel free to provide that too below. Thank you so much, and I'm sending you so much love. I hope everybody's staying safe and being well and staying connected. And just, I know there's a lot of changes going on energetically. There was a lot going on this week. So Mercury was still in retrograde. Some other planets are still. So yeah, they would feel kind of chaotic at times. But please stay balanced and stay centered, and remember to choose the love vibration to help you stay balanced. And everything will come together in one place and synchronize. And I'm wishing you all the harmony and love that there is, that we all get through this together. Much love to all of you.